Uh,
Hello.
Got it.
I'm so very glad to welcome our guests for this session, Chad Haight, that is going to be speaking about aspects of mediation from a different practice field and also from his own personal experience. And we're going to welcome Chad right now. And thank you again, Chad, for being here. It's just such a pleasure to have you for IMAW, the Americas. And I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself, Chad, because I want to know the latest and greatest of what's happening, not something I know from 6 months ago. So please consider this me handing over the platform to you. And I'm very excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm sure before I'm done, you'll get to know me very well here. But before I start, I'd also like to introduce Kathleen Ruin-Lady, my mediator, who is here on the panel just speaking. I've invited her to participate in this talk, given that she was and continues to be an essential part of this story. Kathleen, I invite you to fill in, as you say, to help bring more context and balance to our time together here today, okay?
Okay.
Hello, my name is Chad Haight. I am just another individual in the world, another person on the spectrum of humanity that describes us all. I want to thank you for letting me share my mediation story with you today. Conflict is an inherent human condition. At biological, emotional, and societal levels, our lives are full of conflict. Genes compete for preeminence. The brain recalibrates constantly to resolve conflicts and find equilibrium. Our relationships are teeming with conflicts, resolved and unresolved. Even evolution is called survival of the fittest, an ongoing war defined by conflict. Human history has been the story of the struggle with conflict. Wars tell part of the story. Great religions have been born to help heal us from conflict. The human narrative is a great one as it describes a struggle to overcome conflict. We have sought out means to deal with it: laws, courts, meditation, mediation, healing arts, counseling, moralities, and seeking out counterbalances in love and kindness to help deal with conflict. But few of these pursuits try to find resolution to conflict from within, but instead impose a societal or rule-based sanction to conflict, often resulting in one side wins, one side loses, as if one-sided victory is the only way to resolve conflict. While in personal conflict, I had a life-changing experience with a mediator this past year. My mediator, Kathleen, called our work conflict coaching, as I was the only client involved. After this experience, Kathleen and I thought there might be some valuable lessons in my experience for the mediation profession. The lessons learned, we hope, can apply to people across the spectrum of experience and the universal conflict experienced. A little background is in order. I am bipolar, a disorder characterized by fluctuating mood swings. In its high or manic stage, it can exhibit delusional behavior, wild thinking, unreasonable optimism, lack of sleep, sexual promiscuity, rapid speech, and high energy overall. In its depressive stage, bipolar disorder can sink to the lowest imaginable depths of despair, deep ruminations, negativity, and even suicide. The disorder, once referred to as manic depression, is still largely mysterious in many ways to the medical community. The experimentation with psychotropic medications has been mostly just that, experimental. The mechanics of the brain seem largely individualized, and just why some people respond to certain therapies and not others remains a mystery. There are some strong indications that bipolar disorder may be due to inherited and genetic explanations. This is borne out more by statistics than clear medical understanding. In some ways, we could all be described as bipolar, as we are all susceptible to mood swings. It is the severity that defines bipolar as a disorder or disease. I was diagnosed at age 19 while in college when I became increasingly manic in my sophomore year of school, following a depression experience the preceding year. I invited 6 strangers I met at the Denver airport for a free trip to New York City. I wrote a bad check for the airline tickets and my adventure began. Originally diagnosed as schizophrenic, my prognosis changed with almost every doctor I encountered. Over a 3-year period, I was prescribed over 47 different psychotropic drugs, placed in innumerable hospitals for treatment, placed on higher and higher doses of extremely strong barbiturates to try and control my manic tendencies. I became such a high escape risk at these hospitals that they refused to allow me re-entry because I was too hard to manage. I was literally straitjacketed into submission at one point. Finally, I was court committed to a state hospital in Illinois for the criminally insane, more of a halfway institution for mentally challenged offenders to re-enter society. I had a girlfriend at the time, a psychology major who would later become my wife. Somehow, she stuck by me through all of this, regarding me as perhaps a good case study for her studies. She helped me escape from that state hospital, which only had minimum security in place. And we had a mini adventure moving across state lines to Michigan to hide out and stay low. During my escapades, I kept begging anyone to just get me back to Colorado where everything had started. I thought everything could be remedied by my return to that state, and so I pleaded. I pleaded with her, asking for her last $120 for an airplane ticket to Colorado. I'm not sure what she could have been thinking, but she gave me the money. I'm also not sure what happened on that plane ride, but there were 5 police officers waiting for me at the airport in Denver. I was escorted to Denver General Hospital where they had a psych ward, and there I met a young intern who had just done a stint in the emergency room area of treatment, now wanted to look into psychiatry as a possible professional avenue. He reviewed my chart of countless drug treatments and noted that at no time had I been given lithium by itself. Lithium is on the periodic table of elements, a highly alkaline, salty substance with high toxicity levels. It had been identified as a treatment for manic depression. It was discovered because in areas where there was a higher natural incidence of lithium in the water, there was a correspondingly lower level of manic depression in the population. They still don't fully understand quite how it works on the brain. It seems to moderate the firing of synapses, taming a wild arching in the synapse firings to milder, more manageable levels. It may open pathways for neurotransmission that can help alleviate the extremes present in bipolar disorder. Lithium proved to be my silver bullet. Virtually overnight, everything about me stabilized. I became calm, collected, reasonable, an unbelievable transformation. I saluted the doctor for his genius, exclaimed that he had solved the problem, and asked that he release me from the confines of the hospital. He could hardly argue. He agreed to release me into the care of my girlfriend, who came out to Denver to help. I went on to finish college, get married, moved to Bainbridge Island, Washington, and start a career in publishing. Eventually, I founded Sasquatch Books, a book publisher in Seattle that is now owned by Random House. I always claimed that I benefited from the high side of my bipolar disorder, for I was always full of energy, innovation, positivity, and fearlessness. I also became a serial philanderer with countless affairs and romances with women throughout the years of my marriage. It was a marriage that never should have survived except for the forgiving loyalty of my wife throughout these escapades. Years of therapy helped somewhat, but the bombs had been dropped with repercussions for the entire family, including my 3 daughters. Not only had their father created an unstable home, he had also passed along some of the biological difficulties to his offspring. Meanwhile, my brother and sister, both suffering from the same bipolar disorder, both treated with lithium and other drugs, succumbed to deep depressions, both committing suicide over a 6-year period. It was quite evident that there were strong indications of bipolar disorder from 2 wings of my father's ancestry. The different outcomes in my own family show the vagaries and misunderstandings present in the treatment of the disease. I had always been taught and believed I practiced the tenets of love and kindness, to always show unto others that which you hoped might be shown in return. I had come from a family with deep Christian roots that had ultimately disavowed all religion and turned to atheism. But the fundamentals of love and kindness were foundational to how we were taught and raised. I had a slightly harebrained child rearing philosophy, for one child at least, that taught that the best way to get your way was to see to it that others get their way. The practice would come full circle and be of personal benefit. It was all part of that fundamental love and kindness thing. All of these forces came to bear on our marriage. There were so many issues circulating that it became hard to explain and reconcile everything going on. And then COVID hit. Last year, while we were all quarantined, it became apparent that the lithium that I'd been taking all of my adult life was starting to have a negative effect on my kidneys, a common problem with long-term use of the drug. As different levels of lithium were tried, my behavior started to change. Almost 1 year ago to this day, I took what was supposed to be a family trip to Hawaii while my body was experiencing the first full-blown manic episode since those early days with the disorder. I was zooming as high as a kite with irrepressible energy, certainty, and little sleep, and all the rest of the manic symptoms. My wife, who was supposed to join me, was thwarted when our middle daughter and family arrived at our home in Washington, all infected with COVID. The Hawaiian trip was going to be the grand reconciliation or moment of truth regarding our marriage, where we would finally come to terms with the frailties of our long marriage. Without my wife there, I became convinced that we were heading to divorce, that her inability to fully be involved in our relationship was the missing ingredient. I knew better than to fully blame her. I have come to understand that in relationship, each party is 100% responsible for their own 50% of the relationship. But nonetheless, to put it simply, I was weighing in against her as the responsible party. Remember, it's very hard to argue with someone in a manic episode. And then I met Kathleen. Inadvertently, through our introduction, I found out she was a professional mediator. Mediation didn't mean much to me. I knew it was a settlement finding process, short of juries, judges, and trials, not much else. But intuitively, I thought that perhaps I was meant to meet her at this time, and I employed her to assist me. After some bi-coastal Zoom meetings, she agreed to fly to Hawaii to conduct in-person conflict coaching, a week of 3-hour daily sessions. Today is the anniversary of that in-person process. Happy anniversary, Kathleen. Kathleen was patient and methodical with her new extroverted client. Some remember I was hypermanic at this time. I talked nonstop, pouring out every aspect and many tangents to my story and quest for divorce. Kathleen taught me some techniques, including a switching pause, whereby I slowly learned to pause long enough to allow her to speak. Sometimes she would have to implore me just to shut up for a moment, Chad, as she would try to get a word in edgewise. Kathleen also built a safe environment for me to explore any and all aspects of the deep truths within. I built an abiding trust in her, which was instrumental to our work together. Slowly but surely, through patient reiteration and through good homework exercises, we explored the different variables involved with my pursuit of divorce. I kept coming back to the love and kindness philosophy I profess to believe in so much. Kathleen practiced a rather unusual approach to mediation, an approach that has led her to a 97% success rate in over 900 cases. Kathleen calls her approach the heart and the head. While many mediators approach their practice from a purely practical standpoint, Kathleen believes you must involve the entire person in order to reach true clarification and agreement in the process. We are all complicated individuals as we go into mediation, not just embodiments of figures and facts that need deciphering. Our personalities, our attachments, our biases, and all the things that make us human must be included in this process. In other words, clients encompass the entire spectrum of possibilities. Something important for the mediator to see, understand, and include at the mediation table. Kathleen recognizes these human tendencies, and rather than brush over them, when she sees difficulties or emotions or complications arise, she dives right into it. The solution comes from the problem laid bare. It is through reiteration and clarification of everything that arises out at the mediation table that she elicits honest, heartfelt realities from her clients. This is exactly what she did with me. And believe me, I was full of distractions and complications and emotional upset. She left no stone unturned. Slowly but surely, Kathleen uncovered the clarifications I needed to see for myself what lay at the bottom of my dilemma. Never once did she suggest a solution, offer up an avenue for me to pursue. No, she allowed me to reveal it to myself. The clarity that rose was indisputable, clear to the core, unshakable. Kathleen also addressed the rather apparent medical condition present in me, like the elephant in the room. She guided me towards a more patient form of expression through the switching pause. She never referenced my bipolar disorder as a source of the problem. She remained entirely neutral in judgment. Ultimately, she invited my doctor to the mediation table to address the mania coursing through everything. The doctor and I agreed to double my lithium intake and some other sensible approaches to whatever behavioral changes that might result. This proved ultimately pivotal in beginning the reduction of the mania, but that largely occurred after our mediation sessions in Hawaii had ended. Here is an abridged and edited excerpt from our dialogue together. Do you have that, Kathleen? Kathleen would.
What's going to happen now?
Here would be the dialogue. Kathleen would say, so let me see if I understand this, Chad. If point A is true, then point B follows. And if points A and B are true, then point C should follow. Do I have that right? And I would reply, yes, Kathleen, you have that right, but point C is not true. There's something missing here. If point C is not true, then there's something inconsistent in my thinking. Kathleen would say, tell me again, what point C means to you, Chad? And I replied, point C means my wife is failing to uphold the obligations of the marriage and relationship to live in love and kindness. Wait, perhaps it is not she, but I who is failing this requirement of love and kindness. And it was at this point that the light bulb went off and everything became clear. It was I who was absent from the relationship. It was I that was failing to live up to my own standards of love and kindness. And through the reiteration process and continuous listening to the clarity emerging from within, I came to see clearly that in spite of my professions of living in love and kindness, it was actually I that had dropped the ball in my marriage. It was I that had stopped exercising what I believed in, instead trying to believe that it was my wife who had left the relationship. No, it was my exodus from the relationship that had created the gulf. I realized too that my wife is full of qualities that can so easily be loved. The responsibility was mine to live up to what I believed. It was a breakthrough for me, unlike anything I had experienced in life. It also had the hallmarks of perfect clarity, like a light going off. My internal conflict resolved into internal consensus. I had reached a personal settlement. Now it was just a matter of my partner accepting me back again. So just what did all this mean to the practice of mediation? My first thought was that Kathleen had found an effective treatment for bipolar disorder, that if clarity could be brought to a person in the midst of a manic episode, that there could be a treatment available to people everywhere suffering from the disorder through mediation. Could mediation be a form of therapeutic treatment? I even sounded out people in the bipolar community about the idea of seeking out mediation as an avenue toward treatment. I got zero response. I enrolled in 2 mediation classes through Mediate Guru, both taught by Kathleen. I wanted to know more about the fundamentals of the practice that had meant so much to me. I started writing about my experience, trying to find a premise for the viability of mediation and the bipolar process. I became enthralled by the promise of the mediation process, especially the heart and head approach that Kathleen practiced. Mediation is not thought of as a form of therapy. It is a quasi-legal means of trying to find settlement, usually between parties short of adjudication in the courts. It is not viewed as an avenue toward the resolution of personal conflict, and yet conflict resolution is the heart of the mediation process. However, in most cases, the resolution is to tangibles, to specifics, to property, to the financial. What Kathleen and I came to realize was that my story wasn't one specifically about bipolar disorder and one person resolving personal conflicts. Instead, the clients in mediation come from across the spectrum of people, each of us with our own identities, influences, disorders, and human conflicts that we bring to the mediation table. The lessons I learned were not for all the people out there that might find themselves in mediation. The lesson was for mediators to learn that they are the ones that will encounter people from across the spectrum of possibilities. It becomes imperative for mediators to learn the fearlessness of how to dive into the depths of what has brought their clients to the mediation table. It is the mediators who need to improve their skills to take on the depth and breadth of all the different people they encounter in their practice. This is no small task. The great mediators in the world take on the big issues of countries in conflict, of world peace, of conflicts at the extremes, but the building blocks of conflict resolution begin 1 or 2 people at a time. It begins at your mediation table. Mediation holds great promise. As professionals, you've all borne witness to parties in conflict coming to mutual agreement. There's something truly magical about the work of a good mediator, bringing clarity to the differences that seemed irreconcilable at the start. In some countries, mediation has become the first avenue of pursuit in conflict resolution. Yet there are no great institutions and universities dedicated to teaching the fine art of mediation. It becomes the responsibility of the mediation community to improve its own abilities to take on the needs of humanity in conflict. Mediate Guru and IMAW are making great strides in this direction. As individuals in the world on the spectrum and in conflict, we have to come to realize that this is the universe that all of you mediators will encounter in practice. Recognizing the characteristics of places wherever we are on that spectrum can be an essential tool for the mediator to understand, to dive into, to reach for the clarity required for agreement and conflict resolution. This is a learned skill, one that will make better mediators everywhere and elevate the mediation practice to its deserved place at the forefront of conflict resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chad. In a moment, I'm going to open it up to comments and questions about your story, our story. But first, I'm going to say that's our story, and yours.
It is.
Yeah,
and
it is.
And more important for everybody to understand, it's really Kathleen's story. She's the one that opened the eyes and really showed what this mediation process can actually be part of. I see some other classmates of mine here now, and I think they could all attest to this as well. She has a incredible quality, that heart and head. You know, it's really the depth of humanity tied to the logic that's required to really find good mediation outcomes that brought about this result.
So thank you again, Chad. And yeah, I do want to hear what other people have to say or questions. And I want to say that there are so many mediators that are in the box of mediation that told me not to take this case, that warned me not to do it. And I really thought if mediation is truly a process that we can weave through people's lives to meet their needs, to meet their interests, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And we playfully call it a medical mediation, right? And yes, I did invite your doctor to the mediation table, and that is my practice in all mediations. I will invite experts that are needed, that are not in the room, either via a phone call, on speakerphone, and or their presence, to the mediation table eventually. And what I heard that jumped out at me the most, and what you said, Chad, was coming to the agreement, coming to settlement. You said a mediation is about coming to settlement. And yes, even business mediations, every mediation is aimed toward arriving at a settlement. And although we're also doing something else, people have to come inside themselves as individuals, come to a settlement as well with what's happening on the mediation table, business disputes, whatever it is. There is a portion of that individual that needs to come to terms with what's happening at the mediation table. So we came to terms a lot with what was inside you, your internal settlement agreement with yourself. This is what's coming to my mind as you're talking, which I've never thought about this before, which then impacted your outside world of a family that you love and adored, and that love and adore you as well. So that's what really got at me the most, my friend, when you were talking about that story.
I almost kind of wanted to go on about this whole idea of resolving internal conflict. I mean, if you think about it, it's probably the most difficult thing we all face as individuals is resolving unto ourselves sort of where we are in the world. And so I ascribe actually even higher accolades to the ability of the mediation table to bring this result about, as opposed to sort of two people trying to find agreement between themselves. That might be a very narrow little area, but when you try to find personal resolution, I think that's a higher calling. And that's where the heart and the head all come into play.
Exactly. So everyone just go ahead and put your cameras on if you want to, or make any comments. And Chad knows Jimena and Chad knows Susan, and you're probably both at work. Jimena, you're in the wonderful country of Chile, and Susan.
I know Netanyahu too. Is
Kathleen.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to make a brief comment that, well, first of all, Chad, thank you for sharing that. It was a beautiful, very instructive and insightful. And I think for me, it just highlights, well, among many things, it highlights the value in this unique type of training that has the traditional training as its basis, of course, in the foundation, because it is mediation, but being able to bring these soft communication skills that are so critical, and for the reason that Chad just illustrated, the kinds of skills that came into play here are not necessarily ones you'll easily find in conventional training. And so it is very helpful to have both the conventional training and the supplemental training and ongoing professional development that highlights such skills that enable you to dig deeper and be even more effective and efficient with the time, and ethical, because you get a greater grounding in the process and what is possible with it, with this heightened level of skills.
Yes, thank you. And the principles of mediation that we promise on the table with our mediator's opening statement, especially now with COVID, with all these cultures interacting with each other, we have to tread carefully with people. We have to have clarity. We have to be careful. We have to really truly understand someone across the table's culture and what it means to the mediation table. So thank you, Susan. Ms. Susan, please introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do as well, please.
Thank you. I'm Susan Andrews, and solution.com, and dispute analyst, and basically I specialize in online dispute resolution, specifically negotiation and mediation.
So say your opening sentences because we lost it in a little bit of a lag audio wise. So just repeat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of resolution.com, and I specialize in online dispute resolution, specifically mediation, and with an emphasis having been trained in general civil mediation, and I am a mediator. I focus on domestic and internet business, commercial, and other general civil disputes. Thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome. And just enter your information in the chat because we keep losing you in your first two sentences. So we'll gather that.
I will be happy to. Thank you.
I see Jimena.
Yeah. Hi, Kathleen. Hi, Chad.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Chad, you're amazing. And thank you very much for sharing, because it is personal. So it takes a lot of braveness to share those kinds of experiences. And also thank you, because I've been one of the lucky ones to be able to be in the training with Kathleen, and you as a student, as well as me. But yeah, you have been sharing a lot about the process, and we have learned a lot with your examples. So thank you very, very much. And Kathleen, you are a brave woman, but saying yes when everybody is saying no to you, I think don't take this case, and you say yes, I will. That is very encouraging as well. So thank you very much to both.
Thank you. Jimena, tell everybody what you do, please, and where you are.
I am in Chile, in South America. I do mediations in different areas, especially in family business and in health mediations. And that I will talk a little bit tomorrow in one of these webinars. Yeah.
Both Susan and Jimena are speaking. Susan speaking later on today, and Jimena speaking tomorrow. Kishore has a question, and if I don't express it well enough, Kishore, please come on video-wise and help me out with this. Chad, Kishore is asking, how would you compare your experiences with doctors in their clinics and at the mediation training?
Well, you know, doctors have very little interest in the heart, and they have very little interest sort of in what is kind of going on fundamentally with their people. They see symptoms that they want to treat, and largely the doctors came at it from a pharmaceutical standpoint, and still do to this day. You know, that's sort of why I kept sort of thinking, God, this feels like therapy, this mediation process, and I think there's sort of a misnomer there, but it was the mediation process itself that elicited something very therapeutic from within me. The mediation training was just a reinforcement for me of the value of mediation. I think everybody in this field sort of understands sort of a grander purpose that mediation can bring to the world in terms of resolving conflict. And I just think that along with all that practical learning that you have to do to manage the facts and figures and decipher things, that if you get to the heart of the people that are sitting at your table and dive into those things, that's how you will remember, you're trying to find the mutual agreement from these clients. You're trying to find something they both agree on. And if you don't reach deeply enough, you may miss what really is motivating people and what brought them there to begin with. So I just found that was very well reinforced in the training that I took.
Yeah, I kept telling you that, no, it's not therapy, it's clarity.
That's right.
Yeah, chasing clarity. And clarity until when I asked, is there anything else? Your answer was no, not now, not for now. So it's the same process. So Chad, what would you say was the difference between the doctors that you would go see for therapy to handle this issue within you that was affecting you and your outside life compared to the clarity of mediation?
You know that there's something definitely biochemical involved here. So it's not to disregard doctors and what they can bring to that process. They sort of have to, you know, we're like these vessels of experimentation as they sort of see what kind of concoctions actually can help bring that about. And I salute them very much for their efforts. But there's also just that internal conflict that brought all these issues to bear too. And those are personal things. And doctors aren't trying to sort of resolve those things, maybe nor should they. But the mediation process can actually bring that out. And as Kathleen would see when she saw something sort of disconcerting or difficult coming from me, she didn't try to brush it aside. She dove right into it and said, let's explore that some more. Let's bring more of that out. And that's what brought the clarity. It was sort of reiterating, this is what I hear you saying, Chad. It kept coming back over and over and over again. And then suddenly I found myself providing the ultimate answer from that elicitation. And so they're kind of compatible in their own way, and both necessary. But one really got a result that I'd never seen before.
I kept saying responsibility is the pathway to freedom.
Yeah.
Allocating of responsibility. What were you really saying? What did you really mean? What do you really want?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's therapists, there's psychologists and psychiatrists. And did you approach that healthcare as well? And how is that different than mediation?
You know, my wife and I were involved with years of therapy that I just dove into. I kind of enjoy that process, a lot of sort of exploring and trying to find those things out. But it did never settle the issues. You know, 8 years of therapy together did not settle these essential dilemmas. They were still buried there and sort of waiting to be discovered.
I think mediation, because it needs clarity, I think that's part of how it was impacting for you and I at the mediation table. You can't really move forward well unless you have total clarity. So, you know, the reiteration summaries that I teach in training, where I'm actually reiterating your exact words. So you say it to me, I say it exactly back to you, and then you get to assess your own words. You're not assessing how I've summarized it as a mediator. You're assessing your own words. So you knew that you were hearing your own words back.
Exactly right. And I can't tell you how many times I kept saying, Kathleen, tell me what to do. You know, it was sort of like, give me the solution here. I know you know. I know you know. And she would not do that. She insisted on having it come from me myself. And that proves so much more valuable than sort of, then I could have dismissed her assertions later if I so chose, but I can't dismiss what I found clear unto myself.
Oh, yeah. Can I talk about the time when I said something about you being in love with your wife? Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah. Getting to know Chad has been a pleasure, absolutely 100% pleasure. And so what happens in mediation, which I was just explaining to an arbitrator and a financial analyst the other day, in mediation, when people bond with the mediator, which is what this process of clarity and trust, you know, all mediators know there's a certain sense of bonding. What happens is people feel safe. So sometimes they'll jump at the mediator a little bit. They'll take a little bit of jump toward the mediator with a bit of a incredulous or maybe a little aggressive, you know, posture. So one day Chad said, Kathleen, I think you're biased. And I went, what? He goes, I think you're biased. I don't think you want me to get divorced. I think that you don't want me to be on my own, that I think you're biased toward my wife and you want me to stay married. Remember that day, Chad?
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, and I said, actually, if you really listen to yourself, and I'll make sure I point it out to you, about every 3 sentences, you're talking about how much you love your wife. And I said, and then I asked, do I have permission to point that out to you, Chad, as we move forward? And he said yes. So and so then I pointed it out, and finally one day Chad's like, boy, I do talk about how much I love my wife a lot, don't I? I went, yes, you do.
Mhm,
Suddenly,
mhm.
this clarity that was subterranean, so subterranean, he was accusing me of being biased, his own mediator, right? Now, with the clarity and the allocation of responsibility that Chad allowed me to show him, all of a sudden it came to the top. Oh my gosh, I do love my wife.
That's
And
right. My
love-
assertions had been, I love my wife, but,
Mhm.
and then that converted to, I love my wife and suddenly there was more to it that came to light. So I'm forever grateful.
Thank you. And I am grateful to know you very much as well. I think for purposes of mediation, if I could just say a few sentences, I regard mediation as a pragmatic process that has stages that we have to move through, where we have to memorize pragmatic details and make sure that we have accuracy with what we hear, what people want, what their interests are. And I also regard mediation as having an intuitive, organic process that shows up at the mediation table, even with commercial mediations, which is always what someone says back to me. Even with the commercial mediations, people argue about money and feel deeply about money and feel deeply aggravated about money and are deeply attached to money issues and things. So what I'm saying applies to all mediations. We have to clarify and recognize those organic moments that happen at our mediation table as well. And we have to also look at those meetings in mediation when someone says, yes, I agree with that, and they go like this, and they're nodding their head no. So in the deep dive class that we do, there's actually 3 kinds of yeses and the 3 kinds of nos, 3 kinds of nos. So a yes and a no isn't good enough for clarity. We have to chase on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you mean that yes? And why is the person saying yes? Is it an all in yes? Are they saying yes because they don't want to feel somebody else to feel bad? Or are they saying yes because they feel like they have to compromise? What is that yes at the mediation table, especially with business contracts that are so specifically oriented? So I see mediation as, I want it to grow into the ability to do it all. And I also would like to see mediation grow into the ability of, we're not putting someone into our process. We are allowing our process to be mobile and flexible to move through the structure part of mediation and the organic moments that come up. And if someone says, I want to talk about this now, as a mediator, I don't say, oh, excuse me, well, no, I'm talking about this. I do not. The mediation process was designed in the US by brilliant minds, a US judge, a US attorney general, and a Harvard professor. And it was meant to be simply a conversation at the table. So let all things at the table be part of the conversation. The angry eruptions, which is the new narrative that comes out from the subterranean underbelly emotions that are swirling on the mediation table. Let it all be part of the process of mediation, so we can have the clarity, so we can write negotiations, we can write agreements, we can negotiate the parts where people don't agree, and then write mediated agreements that really stick, where someone can really say, this works now, and it also works future forward in our business negotiations and our personal life. And that process, I think, is truly the 100% power at the table. And it's the last place where we can make our own decisions fully before we enter into arbitration, which was just my last presentation, where now someone else is going to make a decision for us. So the world can grasp on to the full power of mediation and not just the pragmatic process that we try to apply as mediators at the table. Anybody else have comments? Yes, thank you. Open up your mics, please, and please weigh in. Hi.
Chad, I was wondering about the agreement you took with yourself, because I found very interesting that Kathleen, that mediation, I always imagine two or more people with one or more issues, problems, conflicts. But in this case, it was you with yourself, and you make an agreement with yourself. Do you Chad, recognize you did an agreement with yourself? And if you want to share, which is the agreement to yourself?
The agreement with myself was just the start of the process, because I had to take that home too. And I had to reach an agreement with my wife about the things that I had discovered. And that wasn't just like, oh, it's up to Chad and it's all resolved. And so we went through a lot of work together after all this process. And I've actually continued my work with Kathleen. I'm on a weekly basis while working through that process. My wife had chosen a different avenue for consultation, so there was never, the two of us at Kathleen's table. But that has been very successful, I should say, and it's been a very happy outcome as a result of that. So, but ultimately, it did involve two people, of course.
So the goal was just to get started in what you do, how you wanted to move forward, and then interact with your wife, and then go ahead and forge your way together. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I actually found just whole new avenues of ways to behave and feel that were transformative for me, and it actually reinforced my philosophy about giving love and kindness. When you truly do so, it does come back, and it's very transparent to see when it's authentic as well. So,
Yeah.
does that answer your question?
Hi, Son.
Hi. Thank you very much, Chad, for your sharing your stories. And thanks, Kathleen, for things. I'm wondering, because mediation is between two parties. Now, since you are a single party, can you consider this as a therapeutic treatment, or is not a mediation?
It's as Kathleen called it, conflict coaching, because there's just one individual involved, and I'm sure she could speak to that probably a little bit better. But there actually kind of are two people there within me that are sitting at the table having a debate with themselves about what to believe and try. And there's the conflict is the confusion within. And so in many ways, there's sort of two arguments that she sort of had to deal with. And she kept sort of coming back. This is what I hear you saying. I keep hearing you say this. You love your wife, so much, or whatever it was that brought those two colliding conflicts within me together toward resolution. Would you add to that, Kathleen?
Yes, and then I want Yasan to introduce himself and tell everyone where he does as well. So yes, thank you for saying it that way, because we have our conscious mind inside ourselves, Yasan, and then we have our unconscious intuition. Our conscious mind can process about 5 to 9 bits of information, on a regular basis, because it's focused. Our unconscious is like a super ability of like 1 billion bits of information. Well, let's just say per minute, whatever the ratio is. So you've actually, and when people are not on the same page with each other, like when someone's instincts or their core values, like Chad was saying, I came back to my core values. When they're in disagreement with their conscious behavior, with their conscious mind and their behavior, it is a mediation between those two balances. So we approach that mediation in the world, and the mediation process still moves through. So Chad was writing agreements with himself, and I did have Chad journal. And in the United States, we call this conflict coaching, or we call this a life coach. We have names for it now, where people help other people live well, live better. So like
One of the exercises she took me through was I wrote about what keeping my marriage would look like, and then what divorce would look like. And it became exemplified in those two documents, the kind of the conflicts that were going on there. So yes, there really were kind of two minds within me.
thing that we would do in a private session with parties, Yusan. We would say, okay, you know, what's most important to you? What do you want to do? And what don't you want to do? And we look at it from both sides of the issues. And we might even say that in a joint session. Well, Chad was doing all that work himself.
Yeah, but did you have a meeting with his wife? Did you have a session with his wife?
Chad just chose the people that he wanted to come to the mediation table.
No, I'm talking about session, separate session with his wife or no?
Well, Chad chose that process because he was my client. So
Yeah.
I'll let Chad tell you what he chose. If he's
Yeah. At one point, we did bring my wife in and joined a session. And I was so upset, and it's sort of a longer story, that I bolted from the meeting and left her there with Kathleen. And one of the longer lasting lessons that came from that was my wife sort of understood that what Kathleen was trying to create there was a safe place for me. And I sort of came back into the session with Kathleen, but we really never had what you would call, you know, joint sessions per se.
I suggest both of you make a video, and then because it become a teaching for us, for mediators, and also for the therapeutic or conflict resolution, conflict people. You know,
Yep.
it's very very interesting story. It's excellent actually, and I wish for both of you make a video of this. You know,
I like that suggestion.
It will be a teaching lesson to everybody. You know.
Thank you for that. I've sort of been puzzled about how to best maybe approach how this might become a better tool for mediators, and that's a great suggestion of yours.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for everybody. Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Kathleen. Thanks.
By the way,
Can I just ask?
oh, go ahead, Maxine. Hi.
Hi. Can I just ask a question? So just trying to frame it in the right way. So in terms of, to you, Chad, whilst you started in terms of you were on medication, and just say those drugs, and I'm sure the dosage were pretty high, and moving into the mediation. So the process of that, what happened? Does it mean that as Chad, as you went on, you were able through your treatment side, the medication side, to reduce that? Or how did that fit into the mediation by having prescribed medication on one hand and enter into therapy, which was more, I hope that makes sense.
There were some imbalances in the medication that had become apparent. They were trying to get me off of lithium because of my kidneys, and I kept taking lesser and lesser amounts, and tried some other drugs as well. I would largely say that the medications didn't have that much to do with this mediation process. You cannot imagine how fast I was talking during this entire process, and where my mind was racing to. The drugs really, I talked about the bringing the doctor to the table. Well, that really did help, but it took a while. It took till after this clarity had come through the process. So I think there was really almost an organic process of tapping into that clarity that superseded in many ways medications.
Thank you for sharing. So fascinated, because having done mental health myself in terms of, as worker, it brought me very much to the patient side, and clearly those patients became impatient one time.
I think that this is why I kind of call it the spectrum, because everybody you're going to encounter somewhere on that spectrum. But the tenets of mediation, of finding clarity, I think are universal, and so being able to tap into that, I think that supersedes diagnoses or or labels that are given to people. We can all imagine ourselves somewhere on that spectrum at any given time.
And during the period of lockdown, I will say that I am sure the increase, individuals may not want to accept it, But clearly with lockdown, when we're not used to staying at home all day, we're used to going out to office or wherever it is. And then suddenly
Absolutely.
in this position, having to stay, I would
Absolutely.
say it has
Y-
impacted.
You know, I have a sort of a mild theory that COVID itself may have been my trigger. That sort of being faced with this, you know, possibility of demise, you know, people were starting to deny that it triggered, that was part of the triggering of the mania. So I would fully agree with you. And we've seen examples of that throughout the populations.
Thank you. Great job. Great job, Kathleen. Great.
Kathleen, yeah, Kathleen, I have a question for you, because you mentioned that means you bring experts to the mediation table.
Mhm.
Now, do you bring this expert with the approval of the of the parties, or you just call the expert from your own end, yani, basically?
Let's ask permission as a mediator. Chad, I'd like to bring your doctor to the mediation table. Is that okay with you? And then, you
Yeah.
know, and then I take my professional stance. As the mediator, this is what I have been observing. This is what I'm sticking very close to the facts. And same thing with my financial analyst, Will, that spoke a couple days ago. I'd like to go ahead. I have a financial analyst available to help you with your financial documents. Is this something that you would like to do? And so I always ask permission. And because mediators, we cannot practice law, we cannot practice medicine. That's not our purview. We're not allowed. Those experts at my mediation table are valuable. And
No,
then my financial analyst, he can refer up. Well, here's what I think. This is my numbers. You can take this to your accountant to double check me. So in the doctor, I think actually, didn't the doctor reach out to a few other professionals as well to have a discussion?
Mhm.
That correctly. So yeah, so
That's right.
professionals can do what they want.
Mhm.
I see. Okay. No, because I you know, my wondering if possibly the one party may agree, the other party may have concern, like what Chad was saying. You're favoring my wife over me because he has this
Well,
this conception, this perception, you know.
And then we have private session. If there's a disagreement, they can do what they want in private session. So the mediation model is so beautiful. So that's how you do that as a mediator.
Okay.
And then there's something that we've left out. When Chad said switching pauses, you know, mediators, we are skilled, and I teach my skills to my clients when I think they need them. And I said, Chad, let me teach you about a switching pause. I said, I think that'll be helpful. And I say, you know, this is what I know as a mediator, and I call it mediator, you know, skill set, mediator secrets is what I actually say. So Chad, there's a space before one word ends and another word, after one word ends, another word starts. There's a space between after someone is done saying a sentence and before they start a new sentence. And when it's competitive like this and someone talks really fast, no matter what I'm saying, it's competitive. Doesn't matter. I could be the president of the United States, it would still be competitive. And when we slow down like this, it's more of a cooperative conversation. So I now taught Chad pace with switching pause. I taught him how to jump in there when someone pauses, because I jumped in on him when he took a breath, I was talking. So I taught him my skill that I was actually utilizing in the mediation. So it became fun for Chad as well. Oh, he was learning and growing with simple little things, which builds confidence, to learn and grow with larger, bigger things. So there was a lot going on at the mediation table.
It was one of the most valuable skills I learned. And I practice it to this day because I tend to overtalk people anyway.
Yeah. No, because I actually one of the mediators I was talking actually she was doing a presentation, and she chooses to do, when she sees this kind of things, she said, stop, let's do a yoga, a 2-minute silence, everybody cool down, it's calm down the people before she can start again. I
That's
said,
a great.
Put your finger like this, put your hand, just close your eyes and for 2 minutes, and then said, okay, now we go back again. Yeah.
That's a great lesson. In fact, Kathleen often says, well, let's just take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And that's a pause into itself. You can't
That's
talk
right,
while
yeah.
you're breathing in.
And when everyone's talking, see, physics is a big part of mediation. As mediators, if we haven't looked into the law of physics, we need to, because when everyone starts talking, it actually compresses the sound waves in the room, which is competitive. So all of a sudden now everyone's, intuition is kicking in. They can feel the competition. And that's why yelling or cross voices is so difficult, because all the sound waves are just like, like this. So all these things are important to realize. And
I think your time is up now. Thank you very much indeed for everything. Thanks.
Thanks for everyone's comments.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just comment, I think the idea that Yakam made about the video as a teaching tool, that would be fantastic.
Right. About this.
Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day. And Susan, we'll see you in a little while. And Jimena, I'll see you tomorrow. Everyone have
Yeah,
Can't
thank you,
wait.
Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Chad, for sharing. Appreciate it.
All right.
that. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chad.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.